Well, my heart is pounding, but I can't resist. Canada, 1, 2, 3, 4, Canadians, we love thee. Confederation flashbacks, really. I was around. I was just a wee thing. And my sister was just that little bit ahead of me in fine motor skill development that she could easily do 1, 2, 3, 4 with her fingers like this, like in my face every time. I could barely manage 1 little, 2 little, 3 Canadians. So there we were, speaking of the backseat of a car. 60s vintage Valiant, white, push-button transmission. Sister on either side of me. On comes the song. And so I'm working myself up to some kind of hand choreography that I have to do. And I can't do it to my very capable older sister. So I'm just going, oh, darn, missed the first chorus. So I'm getting all, here it comes. Boom! I almost poke her eye out. Second memory, my parents went to Expo 67 as well. Now, I was astonished, even, as a little tiny thing. Whoa, what happened to my parents? There was my mom, AKA Julie. Headscarf, oversized sunglasses, low slung, bell-bottom pants. And my dad, equally Mod Squad, without the afro, Irish Catholic. Now, they sent postcards home from Montreal of incredible things, but the one thing that I do remember was the geodesic dome, and that was the American Pavilion. And of course, I remember fireworks, lots and lots of fireworks. So here we are today, flash forward, tasked with what to do to mark the 150th milestone of our great nation. A small task, really, to define what we could or should do to galvanize and connect 35 million people, 10 million square kilometers, 6 time zones, and a multitude of languages, cultures, and traditions in a clear expression of our collective national identity. And here I am, all grown up, no go-go boots, and looking at 2017 with all of the force of my creative intellect and my history as an event producer. So where do we begin? Well, let me tell you how we begin at One Yellow Rabbit. For 30 years, as you said in the intro, we have been creating, producing, and presenting a diverse and prolific body of work for the community. Over time, we have come up with a creative process design that is somewhat of a reasonably resilient structure that takes an artist or a group of artists from the raw beginnings of an intuitive idea through to the realization of a cohesive and meaningful expression of that original idea. Now, we are not rocket scientists, we are not sociologists or journalists, but we do have, as artists, a burning curiosity about the human experience and about the world that we live in and the societies that we live in. And we're not afraid about asking big questions and embracing the process of answering those questions. Now, the answers take many forms, but the very, very beginning thing that we do on day one of every rehearsal is ask, we ask each artist, who am I now? And then we collectively ask, who are we now? Because you see, it's not a static concept. The world around us is changing every day, as are our collective and personal responses to it. So we have found that determining who we are now is the only way to be entirely present and open to the process that is about to happen. Collectively determining who we are now and what we feel and what we value is the only way that we can look across the room and look into the eyes of the other and trust what is to come, because you never know what's going to happen. The creative process, dredging deeply into the creative process, we always have to begin and assess with who we are now and what we value as human beings today. And so, 2017, with my producer hat on, I ask you, Canada, you prosperous and dynamic nation, who are you now? And who are we now? And who, I guess more importantly, who do we want to be? Because it's the distance between those 2 points that's going to inform our conversation today and be the path forward for our choices. As Canadians, not only do we need to transcend and fully realize ourselves in who we are, and to be able to see the identity of those around us, we also need to embrace the commonalities between all who inhabit this country. In order to find out who we are now and find the key to Canadian national identity, we have to look directly in front of us and directly behind us. finding similarities between the stream of immigrants that have continued to arrive in Canada since the 1600s and the people that were here before them is the only way to reach unity and identity. Because being Canadian, really being present to being Canadian, is not a static concept. It's an ongoing awareness that ought to include honoring the way of life and culture of our First Nations. It ought to assimilate the hopes and dreams of the settlers that came from all over the world. And it ought to acknowledge the conscious choice of the new immigrants that have chosen to dwell in Canada and make it their home. So what exactly is the binding agent that ties us together as Canadians? Where is the common ground? I mean, we are not the USA, the melting pot, with all the bravado of America, love it or leave it. We see ourselves, or we imagine ourselves, as caring and compassionate humanitarians who have, for the most part, gladly accepted the freedoms of this civil society. But have we really accepted the equal and opposite responsibilities as citizens? Could we look in the mirror, everybody, and say so? Let's really think about that responsibility today and not dive into a pool of maple syrup. Let's not just come up with a cheeseball tagline for Canada for 2017 in response to the question of who we are now. Let's have something that's more of a conversation about what binds us together as inhabitants of this great land. 35 million real people in a real time and place. We need to talk about who we actually are and who we truly, truly want to be. So the next step in our creative process, like many others, is always, how do we define success? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And believe me, it's pretty tough to determine on this project of this scope and scale, and not even the most dedicated citizen of Canada could sit through that group exercise. But I would say clearly success might feel like a unanimous nodding, smiling head. If we think about who we really are as Canadians and what we actually care about. Whatever we do, success will require a sober second thought and cannot be banal or overly sweet. Those things will look after themselves. So let's not make another slow motion commercial of youth playing hockey on a pond, as lovely as it is. I would venture to say, actually, that we will only be successful in this initiative if we manage to stir the very soul of this country. If we can actually figure out a way to contact, touch, and celebrate the core of our Canadian-ness. One Yellow Rabbit's vision statement is to enhance society through stimulating, thought-provoking, and life-affirming performing arts. I was going to say, easy to say. But it's harder to do. Blah-de-blah-de-blah. But anyhow, here's some ideas we've been working on to have a soulful conversation with the citizens of Calgary, Alberta, and Canada. As Lorna Crochue said, members of our artistic team have been involved in a very exciting project that began as a conversation, a community conversation with members of our First Nations. The Making Treaty 7 project depended on the support and endorsement of the chiefs of Making Treaty 7 and the community of Treaty 7 elders. That support was duly earned through 18 months of diligent conversations and consultation. The instructions from the community of elders held that the process must be respectful and consultative, and the outcome must be accurate, authentic, traditional, and contemporary. That outcome will be a theatrical performance in Calgary, Alberta. But for 2017, there are 11 treaties. Why are we not starting a conversation in all 11 territories and all 11 promises that were made across this great nation? And why doesn't the outcome of all of those conversations appear on the National Arts Centre stage in the 2017 season? That's an example of what the arts can do, to acknowledge our history, to give it a voice, and to help establish our connectedness to a vital future. Likewise, we began a conversation with Suzanne Steele, our embedded war poet, who was artist in residence with the Canadian troops in Afghanistan. Now that conversation resulted in a project called Afghanistan, Requiem for a Generation, a co-presentation with Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra in commemoration of Canada's military mission in Afghanistan. So what I'm getting at is that there's just lots of possibility. Upcoming is Katie Lang's conversation with Alberta Ballet, with Leonard Cohen's lyrics. So hey, why don't we ask Leonard Cohen what he would do? Why don't we ask Tragically Hip, Michael Ondaatje? Why don't we ask our leading arts organization and established artists, what would they do to bind this nation together? And why don't we ask our emerging artists to voice, to compose, to choreograph, to paint, to write, to perform their Canadian experience? Let's ask every art gallery to curate exhibitions about the most distinctly Canadian objects and artifacts they can find, and have artists and or citizens create installations. Come on, let's have some fun. I also love ideas from last week, that $150 bill. Man, I wish I had one in my pocket. I mean, let's have a contest to name it. We already have a Looney and a Toonie. Let's call it a Lenny, after Leonard Cohen. Who knows? Let's develop that, or let's develop that idea about the love letter to Canada, with every citizen writing on a train car, adding train cars as it moves across Canada. Great idea. Let's develop that, see what we can come up with. So there's already activity and movement towards 2017, but let's not mistake that for accomplishment and fulfillment. Let's not blind ourselves in the global community with our enthusiasm like I did with my sister, with some ethereal concept or idea of Canada. Let's not do an empty, feel-good, happy dance. Let's not borrow from other places or build an even bigger structure than the ubiquitous geodesic dome. Let's not just do fireworks. Let's take an honest and earnest look at who we are now and ask ourselves what projects and ideas will be that binding agent, will be those critical community conversations. Let's consider art as a possibility for the common language, as a viable medium capable of rendering the confluence of people, place, time, tradition, and culture. And remember the words of the Treaty 7 Elders in this process. Let's ensure that the outcome of 2017 is accurate, authentic, traditional, and contemporary. Then let's not drop the ball. It will be critical to figure out how to sustain the outcomes of 2017, to continue those soulful conversations with our country to our 200th milestone, where millions of Canadians will be dancing in an authentic fashion, a real happy dance, because they've made some connection in a real honest way with their communities and their country. Let's document, share, and celebrate those stories. So now is the time to be catalysts for creativity and community. Let's ask the big questions today and be thoughtful and creative in how we answer them. Being mindful of multiple perspectives, we must put those critical conversations at every table across the country. And let's ensure that we have a myriad of experiences in arts and culture across this nation so that they can do their magic in fostering collegiality, trust, and personal connection. Let's excel at stirring the soul of this country. Don't wait for an invitation, or until we find the funding, or until we write a mission statement, or have the strategic planning process. And you emerging artists, absolutely do not wait till there's a new grant stream. You'll be waiting a long time. Get out there right now. Start making art that is relevant to your life and relevant to your community. I urge all of us as citizens of Canada, do it. Spark those critical conversations in your community and find the creative intersections in your city, province, and country. And I ran out of time. Do it now. 2017 starts now. Thanks.